Welcome to episode 20 of the LSQ podcast. I'm your host, Jenny LSQ. This is the final episode for this year, and this has been the first full calendar year of doing the LSQ pod. I just want to say thanks so much to all of the artists who've participated so far, and of course, massive thanks to you, even if this is the very first time you're listening. You can reach me with feedback at Jenny LSQ on Twitter, and recent episodes that I recommend digging into include a conversation with singer-songwriter Leon Bridges from a couple of months ago, an episode from over the summer with multi-instrumentalist and producer Rostam, and I still really love that Tegan and Sarah episode from earlier this year. You know, one of the most recurring threads of the interviews I've done for the podcast so far is the influence artists attribute to a sibling with whom they grew up. In Tegan and Sarah's case, for instance, it's All Right There, or Aaron Dessner from The National, who's also in a band with his twin. And Eleanor Friedberger, the guest in this episode, her first band, Fiery Furnaces, was with her older brother Matthew, and in the interview you're about to hear, Eleanor talks about just what a huge impact her brother's taste in music had on her as she was growing up. Plus, we talk about Rebound, her excellent new solo LP, and after the interview with Eleanor, I'll play you an excerpt from my archive from 2007 when I was assigned a Rolling Stone cover story on Amy Winehouse. I'll tell you a bit more about that once we get to it. Hi, Eleanor Friedberger.
We don't need, all right.
Welcome to the thing, the LSQ thing.
Have you been in this neighborhood for a long time?
I have. I've been here. I've been in Greenpoint for like almost 20 years, and in this.
And we never
for like
bumped into each other?
I know. It's crazy.
Because, I used to live like 3 blocks away from here. So it's kind of weird. We must have passed each other.
Yeah, like ships in the night.
No, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
And where did you grow up?
In Oak Park, Illinois, which is the first suburb on the west side of Chicago.
So it's on the cusp.
Well, it's also the last stop on the CTA, so it feels urban since you still have the L train going there, and you can see the skyline and everything.
Did you go to school in a more urban... Did you go sort of more into the suburban zone for school, or...?
No, I went to the public schools in Oak Park, which
right.
are known for being pretty good. Oak Park is famous because Ernest Hemingway is from there. And Frank Lloyd Wright lived there and built many homes there, so it's kind of a tourist destination for that. But yeah, it was like the best of both worlds because it felt safe, but it also had like an urban quality to it. Right.
But so how long have you, I know also, so we have a zillion mutual friends, including Lizzie Goodman, who's a dear old friend of mine and apparently lives, not that far from you upstate. But how long ago did you move up there?
It will be 5 years in November.
Right.
It's been a second.
And have you in that time, have you been home a lot? Has it been really like truly a home base?
It is truly a home base, but I don't think I would be enjoying it as much if that was where I was trapped,
right.
Month after month. I've been traveling as much as I can, basically. All the while that I've been up there. So it's great to come. It's a really nice place to come home to. And I don't miss any of this stuff.
Right.
That's outside here.
Right.
not to, I don't know how negative I can get, how negative I can get. But just all the stuff that the city has to offer now, it just isn't for me. I just don't.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
I don't need it.
Right, but it's not per se the fact that it's like quiet and woodsy up there, that it's more that you just sort of wanted to go somewhere else, and that's a realistic place to be for now.
Financially, it was realistic, and I didn't realize how much I do like the quiet. I mean, I didn't know, I guess. Yeah. But that is what I like. I mean, it's now when I come to the city, I can't wait to get out,
Right. Do you feel like traveling is that like just pressing the kind of inspiration buttons? Because I know, that your latest album, Rebound, was inspired by this long trip to Greece, but that you didn't start working on the songs until you came back home to your home that you're talking about upstate, right? Yeah. So, I mean, have you found in this time that you've been based up there that like being able to sort of like go have big city experiences around the world and absorb whatever the vibes from that, and then go back to that place and be like, what did it all mean?
I'm quietly nodding. But no, I mean, I still, the best part, not the only perk, but the best part about the job, if I can still call it a job, is getting to travel. I don't take a lot of vacations, you know. It's just, it's about going to different places to play shows and then figuring out how to stay in those places longer or whatever, you know.
And how did you know you wanted to go to Greece?
My mom's Greek American, and I've been going to Greece with her. I'd started going to Greece with her when I was like 20 and going pretty regularly, and then started playing shows there maybe like first we played Fiery Furnaces, played there maybe 8 years ago, and then I became friends with the promoter who put on that show, and then just like snowballed with friendships and relationships there that were, I don't know, each time I went back just made more friends, and and then had never spent a huge amount of time in Athens, and I always loved it, but I'd only been there for a couple days at a time. I'd go off to other places that were more like holiday places. And
so how long did you chill there?
I was there for a month in the wintertime, and then for like another month, 6 months later.
Oh, wow. So that's, you can really live in a place if you're there for a month. And
I mean, I would like
favorite cafe, your favorite cafe. And obviously the album itself is named after a disco or nightclub that you spent some time in while you were there. I thought one of the interesting things, or, you know, I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to episodes of this podcast or whatever.
I did listen to a few.
One of the things, you know, that I'm like always intrigued by is kind of like the zoomed out sort of just like, what is it that you've always been doing? And I, in reading some of what you've said about making Rebound, thought it was intriguing that you were consciously trying to shake things up for yourself and do things differently, but that still you, in the process, identified things that you can't get away from in like the way songs come out of you or something like that.
Sure.
So I wonder if from kind of this current perspective, having put out now several solo albums and all this stuff with Fiery Furnaces and beyond, like, do you feel like there is an innate kind of a song that is the kind of song you've been just sort of always striving to make, if that's not too meta? I mean, do you still feel like you're pursuing a similar goal as when you started writing songs in the first place?
Yeah, sorry, I'm having like a lot of different thoughts at once. The first song that I remember writing with my brother as an adult was a song called Duffer St. George, and it ended up being like on an album that we called EP. That was just kind of like B-sides or whatever you want to call it. And I'd been living in London for a year after being in Oak Park till I was 17, I made a few like big moves before I came to New York. One was going to Austin, Texas to go to college at UT, and I didn't know anybody there, and that was like probably the smartest thing I could have done as a 17-year-old. And then I moved to London for a year after college, also just like as an adventurous 22-year-old.
Awesome cities, Austin and
then moved to New York. But anyway, so I lived in London for a year, and my brother was briefly living at home at my mom's house, and I was just like telling him stories about my trip. Not trip, but just telling him stories about living there. And then the lyrics for the song Duffer St. George, which was the name of a store and like a brand in London at the time, came out of that, me just telling stories to my brother. So to answer your question, I feel like that has been the kind of
impetus.
Or like this, not a template, but the way that I've written songs is just a way of telling these stories that, you know, maybe it started out to amuse my brother, to amuse myself, to amuse a friend. Almost every song that I've written is for someone. And that person may or may not ever know that that's the case. But it's definitely, that's in my mind, like me either recounting or retelling or explaining something. But I'd say 90% of the songs I write are like that.
Right. And so going back to the song you're describing, like how did it become a song from when you say that was sort of the...
So I had this little gap period between, you know, I was living in London and coming back and thinking maybe I was going to go back to Austin, and that didn't work out. I'd always wanted to live in New York, but just as like a fantasy as a dumb kid, based on, you know, music and books and movies and stuff. And so I moved to New York in March of 2000, and my brother moved to New York the following fall. And we hadn't lived in the same town since we were like, 13 and 17.
Wow, yeah.
And actually, I was at a party literally 4 blocks away from here on Franklin. And it was my friend Tim's birthday. And he asked for his birthday present if I would play some songs with him at the party. And he played the drums. And my brother was at the party. And I remember my brother kind of conspicuously sitting alone in the corner, like watching us. And I felt a little self-conscious about him watching. And then afterwards, I just remember being like, well, maybe you should play with me, or him saying something. I'm like, well, why don't we play together?
Right.
There wasn't really a big discussion about it. And I had played a couple of times, including another like short-lived place. Maybe you remember, I think it was called like the G Stop or something, like this terrible little bar right on the other side of Greenpoint Avenue on Franklin. And there was a little stage in the corner, and my friend Michaela, who I'd gone to college with, played drums with me. And
right.
That was the very first time I played in front of people in New York. And actually, I remember Britt was at the show for some reason. He happened to be in town. I just remember like him saying like, you should tune your guitar before you play. That was his advice. I'm like, okay. Yeah.
Did you feel good about, do you remember if you felt good about how it went, or what at that point, what the fun of playing a show like that was to you?
That's a good question.
Or what were the short-term goals?
No,
what were the short-term goals at that time?
Absolutely no idea. I just remember as like my attitude when I was younger, like in college, like I went to so many shows in Austin. It was like just the best time to be. I was there from 94 to 98.
Holy shit.
And I had a fake ID, and like emos at the time, you could go in if you were over 18, I think you had to pay $5, but if you were over 21, it was free to almost all the shows.
Oh, wow.
Even for touring.
Also,
bands.
just thinking of like artists that would have been touring in college towns like that during those years.
It was amazing.
It's like all the best.
And I went to see bands, probably 4 nights a week. Anyway, but my attitude was, remember, just like watching, be like, I could do that. That was like, it was more like this competitive. I'm pretty competitive by nature. And I just remember that was my thing. I was like, I could do that.
So when did you start playing music just on your own?
It wasn't until that age. I mean, I took like piano lessons as a little kid, but quit pretty quickly. And my brother did as well, but then he continued. Like I don't know, he wasn't very disciplined, but good enough to get by in like the high school orchestra. He played the bass and got like an electric guitar probably when he was 13 or 14 or something like that, and played like with boys from school, like in our basement, like had a band, and played like Should I Stay or Should I Go 100 times in a row. But and then my brother was really encouraging. I mean, we had this period when he'd gone to college. He moved to Champaign, Illinois, which was just like 2.5 hours south of Chicago, where the University of Illinois is. And that was just also like a hotbed at that time for, I don't know if you remember like the band Hum.
Oh, yeah.
They had a big hit. Do you really?
Dude, that song still rips. Stars by Hum. Come on.
I listened to it recently. I went through like down this like
she
black
thinks she missed the train of Mars. She's out back counting stars or whatever it is.
I pulled out like a box of 7 inches recently, like with some of my brother like infiltrated this riot girl band called Corn Dolly.
Okay.
And I put it on. It was pretty awesome, actually. Anyway, and then he started his own band with 2 of the women who were in that band. And I used to go down there. And as soon as I got my driver's license, I went to Champaign all the time to go and visit him. And so I started going down there. And it was the kind of place where you could buy a really cool guitar for $200 at the time. So by the time I was 18, my brother bought me a guitar. And then the following Christmas, he bought me a drum kit. And then I got a 4-track the next. So like in college, then I started playing, but not in front of people,
right?
Until much later.
But did you feel sort of an instant attachment to like writing your own songs once you kind of had actually started doing it, or did it have an instant appeal to you?
It wasn't a kind of release for me not at that age. I didn't know how to use it as a tool for that. I think I met a bunch of guys from Chicago down in Austin who I started hanging out with, and they just for fun, they played music every night. I made 4-track recordings, and instead of them being like, "Hey, babe, do it," they included me.
Yeah.
Hey, I don't know.
I know what you mean.
And so that was really.
It was 1978.
Yeah, and go get us some beers, but it wasn't like that. I was included, and so that was important. But I started writing songs around that age, and then when I was 19, I started dating a guy who was in a band, and that had just been signed to Matador Records, and I kind of put my own stuff on the back burner a little bit, whether that was intentional or not, but that's kind of what happened.
Right.
But I mean, before all that, though, I mean, I was so obsessed with music that I didn't even need to be playing it. It served like this other role for me from a really young age. And, for years I spent like just pretending to play, and that satisfied this thing. I don't even know. I mean, I should see like a shrink to really get to the bottom.
Meaning
of
like
it.
As a little kid.
Even as a teenager. I mean, up through high school, like if I wasn't hanging out with friends or playing sports, I would just be listening to records alone for hours.
Right.
Often with my mom's like old classical guitar in my lap, and like pretending to play it and singing out loud. Yeah. Along to the records.
Yeah.
And I did that up until I was 17 years old,
Yeah.
Like for hours. And that was my idea of fun.
Yeah.
So
that started when you were how old? What was
as long as like I had privacy. I mean, when my brother was around, my brother left home like when I was 13, I guess. And so up until then, he definitely ruled the
jukebox
scene. Yeah, I mean, he was the ruler of my universe, for better, mostly for better. I mean, he just introduced me to everything.
Yeah.
And it was a great...
So what kind of stuff would that have been as a kid that he played that you were like, thanks?
I mean, from like a really young age, like, he was really into The Who when he was little. I don't know. I mean, just every classic rock thing you can imagine. And then from like The Who, he got into like The Clash and then reggae. But by the time he was a teenager, like 16, he got really serious about classical music. It's like when we first got a CD player, he probably had like 40 CDs and they were all Shostakovich. Like it was... He was all over the place, but he had a subscription, or maybe not a subscription, but he bought Spin magazine every month. Mm-hmm. And back then, like, you found out about a lot of stuff. But like he loved the Replacements. I remember my mom driving him downtown to see the Replacements when he was probably 13.
Oh wow!
And I had this memory the other day. I was telling a friend, I don't know what year it would have been, the album "Don't Tell a Soul." Mm-hmm. I think they kind of like, got a flack for that album as maybe whatever, but they were on.
And yet it's my favorite. And yet it's my favorite.
Is it?
Well, no, maybe not my favorite, but I ride for that album. I like the like late melodic shit.
There are some good songs on it, but they were on. It wasn't the Grammys. It was like the American Music Awards. That was a thing, and we knew that they were going to be on. So I don't know what year that was. 1989, maybe.
Right.
And my brother was in the basement and it was on, and maybe they were the first act, or maybe, I don't know, maybe they were the first thing. And I remember them coming on, and this was like almost like a moment of, you hear all these old guys talk about seeing the Beatles for the first time on something, and you have this like electric moment. And when I saw them, because we didn't have MTV growing up, and I just remember seeing them come out and play the song Talent Show, and they were dressed kind of crazy, and it was way faster than the album, and they were spinning around, and it was like, it's a short song anyway, and it just happened so fast, and like my jaw was like dropped watching this. But I knew in the back of my mind that I should have been yelling to my brother to come, like, they're on, time to come, and I didn't. And part of me, I think, a little part of me, like, didn't tell him on purpose because, like, I wanted that moment to myself. But he came up and I was like, you missed it. And he, like, I swear to God, like, He either got so mad that it was one of the most mad times he's ever, or he hit me. Like it was like a violent anger.
Yeah.
And I felt really guilty too, because I knew I should have like screamed his name to come up. It was a formative moment. For sure.
And so it sounds like that's the beginning of it becoming...
I don't know how I got there, sorry.
Of like that kind of thing becoming your music. Because I was going to ask, like, what was the first sort of stuff you started hearing that felt like you had found it yourself, that was very special to you because it was something that you decided to press play on?
I mean, going back to like a really young age... if we're about the same age, like when Stand By Me came out and La Bamba, like I was listening to only oldies. I was obsessed with 50s music. Also, like there was a radio station in Chicago, as I'm sure there was in every big city, just only played oldies.
Oh, yeah.
So I only listened to that. And then my best friend growing up, my parents were big music lovers, but they mostly listened to classical music. And, my best friend's mom was like really like a rock chick and had like in their TV room had all of her original records from the 60s and 70s. And she was easygoing about like, if you ever want to play anything, go for it. And for years we just knew that they were there, but didn't. And I don't know what, one day, maybe we were 10 or 11, I remember just flipping through them and I pulled out Physical Graffiti because it looked like a toy almost, that record cover that pulls out in the build, and I just took out one of the records and just put it on, happened to put on the first song of whichever side it was, and the song Houses of the Holy. It was the song Houses of the Holy, and it was another one of those moments where I was like, what? Like I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. Yeah. And of course I'd heard Led Zeppelin on the radio probably, but you never heard that song on the radio. But for some reason, so I got completely obsessed with Led Zeppelin. And my brother, to answer your question, like he hated Led Zeppelin. Now he doesn't feel that way. But at the time when he was like a little teenager, he thought like you could like The Who or you could like Led Zeppelin. You couldn't like both or whatever. And so I had to keep that secret from him. So like when we first got the CD player, like I started buying Led Zeppelin CDs, but I wasn't allowed to play them. Until he left. Anyway, but then it was more like, I was 15 in 1991 and got into all that stuff.
Right. And I know
previously I only listened to old music.
Right. I know that Neil Young is a big one for you. I've seen you mention his name in a few places. When did you have your big delve into the Neil catalog?
I'm not the biggest Neil Young fan, to be honest. I have other people, but for some reason, I feel more like connected to his like physical presence. I mean, I love his songs, but there's something about him as a presence that I really, I don't know if admire is the right word, but like I would want to channel that.
Interesting.
And his individuality and like his singular. I mean, he's like totally singular.
Yeah.
But of course I love his songs too. Actually, I remember my brother was in a band when he was a teenager and they played Keep on Rockin' in the Free World. Maybe that was like the first introduction. I don't know.
Right. But what you're describing, it sounds like in part, and I think now that you mention it, where one of the references to this involved when you're on stage, describing the sort of, when you're on stage, where you kind of need to tell yourself that you're Neil Young or something.
Sure.
You might be Neil Young or whatever. Did you, at what point, since you started to get up on stage and perform music, was it hard at first, or at what point do you think you kind of found, because I remember seeing you play a couple of years ago, I guess, in LA at Spaceland, the Satellite, whatever that place is called, and it was the first time I'd seen you play a solo show ever, and I mean, I was just sort of like, what the fuck, why is she so cool,
Thanks.
In terms of like, just like, some people you just don't, they're never going to be that comfortable on stage or whatever, not like where it's just like the most normal place to be. But yeah, was it a process for you to get to a place where you figured out how to not be inhibited in your body on stage?
Yeah, I mean, aside from like really early days when I wear like a baseball hat on stage and was kind of nervous and didn't know to look at my hands, and just I don't have I've said this so many times, so I don't want to say it again, but it does come down to just having this natural, because I was good at sports as a kid and just feeling that gave me a huge amount of confidence that I just, I don't feel as self-conscious in front of people as maybe I might. I don't know.
Yeah, that's
but
interesting.
I still don't know what I'm doing though. I mean, I honestly have no idea what the fuck I'm doing. But I mean, it's nice that it comes off as this thing that you're describing, but I just don't really know.
Right. But
sorry, that wasn't a good answer.
No, it is. No, because some people I think feel that they are actually very nervous about it, but somehow they go into a someplace else, you know what I mean? And to get through it, but it sort of always feels like, was that the most absurd? Like, did that look natural at all?
Right.
You know?
Well, I really like it, so that's good. I also don't do anything that different on stage than I would do in I don't think of myself as being necessarily like a terrific performer. And people say like you are a good performer and you've got good energy on stage and all that, but I'm not very performative, you know?
Right. No, you're not doing, splits.
But I'm not doing
Pete Townsend.
I'm not bending over. I'm not doing much of anything, you know? Although I'm moving, I do feel like I'm moving, and I am singing and doing stuff. But yeah, I'm not going to this zone where I'm channeling.
Right. And
something.
is that and compared to when you're in songwriting mode, I mean, how does that do you have to go into that sort of, I know that you had previously to Rebound written lyrics first and then written songs, melodies to go with those lyrics, as opposed to the sort of ham and eggs yesterday, stream of consciousness kind of thing that other people describe experiencing. But yeah, is it nonetheless, when you're at the point when you're doing it that way of writing down ideas for lyrics, are you in some sort of, is it like a fugue of a kind?
There's like different phases. Right now, I happen to be in one where I'm like, you know what? I'm at home right now for a little while. I'm going to have a few drinks or maybe smoke pot or whatever and just have fun and like go to where I play and like make some noise.
Right.
And because I'm not feeling pressure right now to get something finished, but maybe I have like one verse to a song and a chorus to another song. And maybe there's like 4 or 5 things like that. And I'll be messing around with those 4 or 5 things over and over again. And that's fun.
Right.
But then there comes a time where like, oh, okay, now I have to actually start. And that's, I'm not going to smoke pot or I'm not going to be drunk.
It's one or the other.
Or whatever. Right. Yeah. And it's like, well, now that's almost like, okay, I'm writing a research paper in college, like, and you get that feeling of like, I have to like actually look through all my notes and get the work done.
Right.
And I happen to be a freak who, although I was a procrastinator and would wait to the end, I actually like doing that. And I love putting those ideas together to make something work.
So did you have other things that were like kind of wordy zones that you nerded out on before you started having lyric writing as a place to direct that energy? Were you like a big fan of, poetry or just like some other, journaling or whatever as a kid? When did you discover that you liked putting together words?
I don't know. I mean, this whole I always wrote pretty naturally, and I wasn't like ever trying to find my voice. It came. I was just. If people who know me, say like you're very direct, you're very honest and clear, and that's kind of always how I wrote.
Right. So, I'm guessing to an extent with Fiery Furnaces that just because that era, mid early aughts, whatever the fuck you want to call it, 2003, 4, 5, up until 2010.
The good old days?
The good old days. But where...
the
almost good old days. The illusion of it being the old days, but it was like, oh no, but there's an expiration to it, so enjoy it while it lasts days.
Yeah.
But that I'm guessing that you're in a band with your brother, you're playing songs that are not being made to fit a marketplace in any way, shape, or form. But then suddenly you're doing well enough that you can play, you know, big tours and make more and more albums, and now this is your fucking job and you get to do this. And I just sort of wonder, like, at what point did you decide, like, at what point was it clear to you, like, yes, I don't have to come up with a backup plan. I'm doing this for real. I mean, did you have a moment where you were like, oh, hey.
Just today, I'm like, what's
just today?
I'm like, I'm always thinking about that.
Right.
Honestly, like.
Really?
Yeah. I don't have a backup plan. And I think the only way to do this is that I never had a backup plan. I mean, my mentality, but I'm a practical person. So I'm like, how am I actually going to pay my mortgage for the next 6 months? Like, I do think, like, wait, I do need some other job.
Right.
And I think about that, but then when it comes down to it, I don't have a plan.
Right.
And I think the only way that you're kind of foolish. I don't know what people do now. I don't understand what's happening in the world right now, in our small little world, and obviously the world at large. But I mean, I really don't understand how people like start bands now and what they're thinking.
It is kind of interesting that it does seem like it's of course the micro economy of our world, whatever that means. Well, it's still, there's the 1% of our corner too, where it's like feast or famine. Either you're like really killing it and have plenty to share and you can start, and you know, I really appreciate what like the Bon Iver guys and the guys from the National do with their to pool resources and try and help make other stuff happen that is not with any profit in mind, because it's just like, oh man, there's either you're just like, I need to have another job besides going on tour, or you're like rolling in it. It seems to me, which, you know, it's great that some of the artists of the past decade that have made it to the other side of being that successful, like, are some of my favorite artists ever. It makes me happy that there are that many listeners who love this kind of stuff, but at the same time it's like, oh man, yeah, you really either make it or you don't more than ever now, maybe, I don't know. But I guess that was sort of, if there is a question in there, the question is sort of like, what kind of have you learned over the years since, including Fiery Furnaces at its most, say, commercially successful, like zooming out on all of it, like if you want to not have a plan B, what sort of philosophy do you have to adopt as an artist? Or like,
I'm a very pragmatic person, and yet I have this like fanciful sort of job, a lifestyle that doesn't really make a lot of sense. But I mean, I don't know if this is answering your question at all, but I mean, I'm very frugal, you know, like I don't buy things on credit card. I mean, I'm just like, you know, I'm getting by, and that's great.
Right.
But I didn't like move to New York with like, I'll try this out for a few years and then I'll go to grad school and become, like, I never thought that. I was just like, just on this blind kind of path. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of remarkable, I guess, when you think about it. It's also very dumb.
But I mean, does it feel like something that you have to do?
It's a good. I'm
music
too.
Or
I'm too like
things.
Midwestern and pragmatic to say that.
Right.
But
you're like, I'd be fine. I'd miss it, but I'd be fine.
But yeah, I don't know what I would do.
Right.
So I guess I have to.
But would you record songs for yourself at home in the same way you do now, even if you were never going to share them with anyone?
I'd like to say yes.
Right.
But I mean, well, if I don't have a large enough audience to like continue to play concerts for people to make a living, it's like I have to figure out another way to like.
Are there things
sell
that
my personality?
Are there things that innately appeal to you as like a vocation that you would be happy to acquire the training in to do if money was no object? Like the hypothetical where I'm like, I would learn to be a hairdresser. Honestly, I've always wanted to.
I would be a surgeon. I would be a surgeon.
I'll cut hair. You'll cut organs.
Skin. Yeah. Okay. Maybe I'll become a doctor. Oh my God.
You're going to become a surgeon, Eleanor. It's going to happen.
But more like mole removal. Like I'd be into that. Like light surgery.
Right. Seems like a good plan.
Yeah.
I think that's all I've got for you. I think that's an apt place to wrap up. I don't want to keep you from your medical training. I know that it's
oh my gosh,
a long
I've got
course
like
of
8
study.
years or something.
You got like 8 years of study ahead of you. Enjoy your internship. All right, well, thanks again to Eleanor Friedberger. Hopefully she'll announce some more North American dates for next year. At this point, nothing listed over at eleanorfriedberger.com, but go ahead and bookmark that yourself, why don't you? And next on this episode of LSQ, it's an archive clip from an interview I did in early 2007 with Amy Winehouse. I was assigned a cover story for Rolling Stone about Amy and ended up spending a couple of days with her, a day and a half or so in Toronto and then another day in Miami. And leading up to what you'll hear, this is the beginning of our first interview, Amy and her boyfriend had just gotten into a massive fight, and she was in tears, and so it was an intimidating way to start things. And you'll hear a little bit of that discomfort in the few minutes or so worth of audio I'm going to play for you. There's a lot of interesting stuff in the few hours worth of tape I have with Amy, and so I will devote a greater portion of an episode, if not an entire episode, to that at some point. But for now, a little bit of insight and some kind of uncanny similarities between this little bit of conversation and what you just heard with Eleanor Friedberger. So let's get into it right now. So why don't you tell me, for starters, just how you first, like as a kid, got interested in playing music and writing music?
I don't know, my brother had a guitar, my brother played guitar, and I think I used to play that when he was at the house. And then when I got a little bit of money for myself, I got my first guitar, and then I could play whenever I wanted, really. And I guess I always write like poetry and stuff like that, so just putting songs together wasn't that spectacular, it wasn't that much of a difference.
And how much older than you is your brother?
4 years older, yeah.
So how old were you when you got your own guitar?
I think I was about 12 when I started playing. I must have been about 14 when I got my own one. And what did you immediately start playing your own, writing your own songs, or were you just playing other stuff? Yeah, pretty much.
So what are the first songs that you played or wrote sound like?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
I didn't start writing until I was about 15.
Right.
And by then I was listening to a lot of jazz, a lot of hip hop,
right.
Like a lot of Mos Def, a lot of hip hop.
Right. So at what point did it go from being like this sort of? Did you always feel like you wanted to be a musician or a songwriter or performer professionally, or did you have other things that you were interested in?
I didn't ever want to be a musician. I just thought I'll always have it on the back burner.
Yeah.
I went to be a roller skating waitress. And, like doing your kids. Well,
so you wanted to be a roller skating waitress?
Yeah. Yeah.
Was there like a place near where you grew up where they were roller skating waitresses?
No, I always liked music stuff. I always watched music film. Right. That's what I grew up on. I didn't really watch anything current, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Was that stuff that your parents introduced you to, like those kinds of movies and stuff?
I guess so, yeah, like American Graffiti and all that kind of stuff, yeah.
So, where did you get your tattoos?
I got them done in London.
All from the same artist?
No, I got them all over really, London, New York, a couple of places, Manchester.
Right. When did you start getting them?
About 15.
Right. So which one's the first one?
I got a Betty Boop on my back when I was 15. I just like tattoos.
How old do you have to be in England to get legally to get tattooed?
No, not a clue.
They were just like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
What did your parents think of that?
Yeah, my parents pretty much realised that I would do whatever I kind of wanted.
Right.
I was quite young, so that was it, really, yeah.
So how long after you got that first tattoo, did you keep it a secret from them, or did they know about it? I
think they knew about it straight away. I It's just my mum and dad, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'm not really, I'm not that badly behaved.
So when did you start pursuing playing music professionally?
I think when I was about 16, I was singing with a jazz band, and a guy came to see me, my friend Nicky Shematsky, and said to me, "Oh, come and have some studio time." And I didn't understand why, and he said, "Well, you'll make an album, that's what you're going to do."
Right. Did you not, were you not aware that you were, were you not, aware that you were talented?
I didn't think it was special to be able to sing.
Right. So you were just sort of like, okay, you want me to make a record?
Yeah, I just didn't get it. I didn't believe that he'd let me.
Yeah.
Do exactly what I wanted to do. I was like, well, what's in it for me? Oh, sorry, I was like, what's in it for you?
Yeah.
I didn't get it at all. And then I started doing gigs when I was about 18. I was going out with the guitar.
Yeah.
And I just didn't understand. I love playing guitar, and I didn't understand that I could go in a studio and pay nothing and write whatever I wanted to write, and I just didn't understand why.
Yeah, why? Yeah. So at what point did it start to switch over from being like, okay, bye, to being like, well, this is what I do now, and I'm taking it seriously?
I don't think I've got there yet.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's about it for episode 20 of LSQ. Again, thanks to Eleanor Friedberger for her time, and I don't know what to say about Amy Winehouse except that it was a fascinating experience spending time around her, and such a tremendous loss that she's no longer with us. I'm certain she would have made some more incredible music, and yeah, I think about her often. And LSQ is off for the month of December, but there's plenty to look forward to in 2019. I've already taped some new interviews with Hamilton Lighthouser and Mike Hadrius, who is Perfume Genius, and so I'll look forward to bringing you those in early 2019. In the short term, if you're not already subscribed, do that so you get new episodes immediately. And reach me with feedback at JennyLSQ whenever you've got something you want to share.